Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with singer, songwriter, speaker, abuse advocate, and podcast host Diana Winkler. No one expects to go into the ministry and be the victim of abuse, but that's what happened to Diana. On the outside, she was dutifully serving her church for years, conforming to the standards expected by the church, but behind closed doors, it was a different reality. She is an abuse survivor that uses her music and other healing resources to help others through the healing process. She does this through her Mending the Soul healing groups and her podcast, The Wounds of the Faithful. She has a great story. Enjoy this interview.
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for taking a minute out. I appreciate it.
Yeah, hopefully I have more than a minute.
Right. Yeah. Just a figure of speech.
Yeah.
So, before we get into your life as a singer, songwriter, speaker, advocate, podcast host, I want to know first and foremost, how did you do during COVID? How did you survive during that time? Because you're obviously a very busy person. And how did that time period change you?
Wow, that's a great question. It was really hard for everybody. My husband and I were both musicians. We were all both doing music with 3 different bands, and we both have day jobs, so very good day jobs. And when the pandemic came, we all had to work from home, and that was fine. But then my husband, he was in remission for a medical condition, and he came out of remission, and he got very sick. So not only did we have the pandemic, which stopped everything as far as music goes, we couldn't do any gigs. None of our band members wanted to come over. We really couldn't go anywhere anyway because my husband's immune system was compromised. And so it was really hard to do anything musically. I'm sure many musicians feel the same way. It's like you have to pivot, and that's pretty much what I had to do. My husband lost his job because of his illness. He ran out of FMLA, and so then I was the only one with any income coming in. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? I don't have any band here to write any music with or to do any recording and songwriting. And so I decided to upgrade my keyboard. I had a digital piano. I've had one for, goodness, since the year 2000. Then I got a second one, which is almost identical, which is newer. But it was just a digital keyboard. Didn't have any bells and whistles, and so my husband's looking on Sweetwater and said, look at this synthesizer. This is really cool. It's got everything. It's got every instrument you can think of. And, maybe this would help you to write music and to produce some songs, and you can be your own band. And so I thought, that sounds like a neat idea. And I was ready to upgrade from just having a digital piano to something more, had more bells and whistles on it. So I bought it, and I've never had a synthesizer, and so it took a long time for me to figure out how to use the thing. The owner's manual is really small type, and I downloaded it off the internet and blew it up, but I didn't know what most of the terminology meant. So I'm calling Sweetwater. They couldn't tell me how to use it. I was over at Guitar Center. They sell stuff, but they don't teach you how to use it. And so then I started getting ideas of, well, maybe I should find a synthesizer teacher. And it took me 2 years to find somebody that could sit with me and go through what all these buttons on this synthesizer does. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but so I paid him for, I think we met for 5 weeks, and I couldn't believe it. It was like, wow, now I can create some stuff. I'm not afraid to touch any of the knobs, thinking I'm going to blow something up or ruin anything. So I started writing some more music. I was collaborating with a poet, an award-winning poet, Wanda Burnside, and I just finished a song. It's a cover of a sacred tune called O Divine Redeemer. I've loved it for many, many years, but I thought I'm going to try this Juno synthesizer and see if I can do all of the instruments and create my own orchestration. And so I just finished it last week and just, putting on some polish and spit still. But I put on the strings and the harp and let's see, what else did I have on there? I had a cello and violin. I had a piano and a few other instruments. And I just laid one track at a time in our studio here. And yeah, it was a lot of work, but when it was done, it was like, wow. I actually created a song without another band. My husband's a drummer. He has not been behind his drum set for over a year because I've been wanting to have him do the drum tracks on my song and still waiting for him to feel well enough to do that. But yeah, it's been rough. I still have not gone out gigging again. I'm focusing more on songwriting and recording right now. That's the season that I'm in. So that's a short story of the pandemic.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. And to get a handle to kind of simplify what you do in your life, what you do for a living, if you were at a career day at a elementary school and one of the kids looks up at you and says, "What do you do for a living?" How would you answer them?
Well, I have a day job in healthcare administration that pays the bills. I would say my calling is I'm a singer, a songwriter, and I'm an abuse advocate, which means that I come alongside survivors of abuse and help them to heal from that. So I do that through small groups of survivors and guide them to heal from all kinds of different abuses. And I also write music for abuse survivors. I'm working on an album right now. It's a concept album for the journey towards healing. And I also have the podcast, the Wounds of the Faithful. And I feature my music on there, but the main thing that I do is the podcast is about helping people to heal from abuse. So that's what I would say that I am. That is my calling. And a lot of times it's very difficult and challenging, heartbreaking, but it's definitely what I was put on this earth to do.
So take me back to where you were born and raised and kind of how you got the seeds of wanting to be an advocate and be a musician. How did all of that begin for you?
Well, the musician part, that was born and raised partially in Pennsylvania, and then we moved to Arizona when I was 10 years old. But I did not come from a musical family, but I had the love of music from a very early age. My earliest memory is kindergarten. I would sing during the school plays, and my aunt and my parents would come to see me, and my aunt would give me a silver dollar for singing out loud. And I would ask her, "Aunt, did you hear me all the way in the back row?" And she said, "Yes, I did. So here's your silver dollar." And that started my journey, I would say, in music. I took guitar lessons. I mostly enjoyed singing. Loved singing. Was in choir. I was in plays. I did solos. I also like dance. I took a lot of ballet and other dance classes. So I really liked the arts. And my parents were really great because they had a very eclectic taste in music. We were exposed to a lot of different kinds of music, all of the greats, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, and ABBA, and, Karen Carpenter, and, Cream, and Freddie Mercury. I mean, I think the only thing we didn't listen to was probably rap or hip hop, but, I'll get exposed to that later in life. But, then I didn't get formal voice training until I was in college. When I was in college, I decided I wanted to start taking piano. And I wanted to do formal voice training to take my gifts up a notch, which I did. And then I started songwriting because my music teacher was a songwriter and a wonderful musician at that. So that's where the music part started. I sang in a lot of venues in Virginia and Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And I've been to a few countries too. I've been to France and Puerto Rico, Canada. And they always wanted me to come and sing for them. So I've done it quite a bit as far as the music part. Wrote my first song for my first husband, my now ex-husband. I wrote a song for our wedding. So you want to know about the advocacy part, with the abuse part? Yeah, that's the dark part of my story. Is now I did not come from an abusive family, but in grade school, in 7th grade, I had a guidance counselor that groomed me for a year, gained my trust, and then assaulted me one day. And, I trusted this man. And now, fortunately, I was able to get away before he could do anything like actual raping me. But fortunately, my parents believed me, and the school believed me, and they hired a private investigator, and even the private investigator believed me. Now, it was my word against his because I was alone in his office, so he got off scot-free. But, thankfully I went to another school after that, went into high school, and, I did heal from that. But later in life, I met my now ex-husband in college. And I don't know how far you want me to go into the story, but I was in college for church planting. So that means that, we go and start churches all over the world, all over the United States. And this man was abusive. So while we were going around and planting churches, we looked like the wonderful leaders that we should be, but at home it was a different story. He was a different person. He was verbally abusive and very controlling, manipulative, and he did every kind of abuse except for hitting me. And that's what people usually, when they hear the word abuse, they associate it with physical abuse. And that is true. That is part of the word abuse. But I learned the hard way that there are more than physical ways to abuse somebody. He never laid a finger on me, but he made my life a living hell. And the church that I was a part of was very legalistic, and they enabled the abuse. They fueled the abuse. They gave my ex-husband permission to continue with his abuse. And the church I was a part of at the time did not believe in a divorce for any reason, so I was kind of trapped. At least I thought I was trapped. There was no way out. And, I was going through the motions and doing all the good stuff on the outside, but on the inside, I definitely was dying. And it wasn't until, we were married 13 years. We had our 13th anniversary. And I'm abbreviating a lot of stuff because of time, but we had a terrible anniversary. It was a nightmare, and that has happened before. We had a big, huge fight, and I went to bed crying, and I thought, I can't do this anymore. I cannot live this way. And I pretty much said, God, I don't care, I'm just going to take the consequences, whatever it is, to get out of this relationship. I can't do this anymore. And I called one of my friends the next day, and only a few of my friends knew what was going on, and told her what had happened the night before, and she's like, I'm tired of you calling and telling me about this horrible man. You need to get out of there. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get out of here. The church won't let me leave, and I'll lose everything. I'll lose my ministry. I'll have to start all over again. And she said, well, God's not going to stop loving you because you leave your abusive husband. And no matter what, he's going to be there for you. And it was like, that was the first time that the light went on, that I have value and worth as a person, that I don't have to put up with that kind of treatment. And so I decided to leave. I made the plans to leave, and it was, I left, I made the decision in January, and I left in April. This was 2008, and I tell you what, it was the hardest thing I ever did, and it was not easy. But I'm so glad that I did. My life is completely different right now than what I went through. And when I came out of the abusive relationship, yes, I did lose everything. My friends, my church, I lost my job, and I definitely had to start all over again. Well, when I came out of the abusive situation, I thought, I'm the only one that has ever gone through this. And I found out that that's not true. And I decided I wanted to help others that have gone through what I have gone through, which specifically is people that are in the church that have been abused. And I started writing music for what I've gone through and tried to start some sort of organization, especially in the new churches that I was a part of. Hey, I want to start, a group for ladies and, that are survivors of abuse. And unfortunately, a lot of the doors closed. Abuse is not a sexy topic, and abuse, most people want to, just pretend it's not there or, brush it under the rug. So it was a long time before I met my now husband, Brian, He was also an abuse survivor. And when we got married, we decided to go and look for a good church we could serve together. And we started going to the church we're at now. And again, I wanted to see if they would let me start, a little group, ladies group or something. And the pastor's wife said, "Oh, that's a great idea. We already have one of those. It's called Mending the Soul. And would you like to be a part of that?" And I said, "Yeah." So I actually went through the group as a survivor myself first. And then I was so impressed with Mending the Soul that I decided to train to become a facilitator. So I lead those groups, myself on Zoom. And I used to do them at my church. Of course, I don't do it anymore at the church because of the pandemic. But you mentioned that, speaking of the pandemic, yeah, we had to move everything onto Zoom, the group that I lead. And that was difficult because you don't have that face-to-face interaction. But now it seems like old hat, that it's not a big deal anymore. Everybody's been on Zoom. Everybody's done it, and so that was the other pivot of the pandemic was, okay, now my abuse advocacy has to go online. So yeah, with the advocacy, when we switched the groups from the church to online, the group is 18 weeks long. That's how long we meet to go through the curriculum. And I realized that after the group was over, they needed more resources. So that's why I started the podcast, actually, was to give them more resources. I have, guests come on to the show who are survivors or industry experts to give them more resources to keep them going on their healing journey. So yeah, that's the short story of that.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. That gives me a good backdrop and leads me into some more questions that kind of probe a bit more into you. What was the album, since you're into music and you're a musician, what was the album for you growing up, that, like, one album that you still come back to that you just absolutely loved?
Well, there's so many, but I'll have to say, if I look back when I was a kid, it would definitely be either ABBA Super Trooper. I've got that whole album memorized. And I loved the Xanadu soundtrack. Olivia Newton-John, rest in peace. Those are two very influential albums. And yeah, I still listen to them on Spotify. They're just awesome.
Well, if my wife heard that, she would be ecstatic. Those are probably top on her list. She's really a music junkie and likes just, I have a 16-year-old stepdaughter, so she's listening to everything that's modern and all. I mean, she just loves music. But those two albums, I actually have Xanadu on vinyl. And just last year, we were on a trip to the lake with a bunch of people, and ABBA came on, and we just, it was on Apple Music, and we just went for it. So, so I'm curious for you, as somebody that helps people in situations where they need help, abuse survivors, and, being a musician, people look up to you and you provide that for them. But what about you? Who's a role model? Who's somebody that you would consider a hero or a role model for yourself?
That's a good question. Well, I've had a lot of role models throughout my lifetime. It just depends on what stage of life I've been at. I was always friends with senior citizens. I did not really grow up with grandparents, and so I kind of levitated towards senior citizens that would take me under their wing. I mean, I've had I love libraries, so I was really, really close with the high school librarian, and she gave me a love for reading. I used to live next door to a famous Western artist. He did pottery, Western pottery, and he gave me a love for classical music like no other. And I used to come over his house, and he would teach me how to create pottery and how to paint. And he was a classical music aficionado, and he had a great collection. And he would put on the music. And to this day, Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1 in B flat minor is probably one of my favorite classical pieces. He was a great, great mentor. He's no longer with us. High school, it was definitely like my English teacher as well. I had college was definitely my music teacher, Becky. She was not only my music teacher, but a close friend, and I would come over crying, and with my, petty 20-year-old problems, and yeah, she would teach me my music and piano and voice lessons, and then we would talk about life. And I found out later, and this is really horrible, but I found out later listening to another podcast that is also an abuse advocate. She was a guest on somebody else's podcast, and I did not know that she was an abuse survivor. She was raped by her father-in-law, who was the pastor of the church. Pastor of the church that I went to in college. And so that was devastating for me. And I look back on that, it's like, she's telling her story, and I'm like, I remember that day she had lost her voice because of the trauma. I remember that day that she lost her voice. She told me it was because, her recent pregnancy. And I found out that was that week she had been assaulted. And I just felt bad that I wasn't there for her. I know I had my own problems at the time, but yeah, I'm still waiting to have her on my podcast, but she had been a huge influence in my life. She never forget her. She lives in Virginia, and obviously I'm in Arizona. But yeah, she had been a huge influence on my music and songwriting, and just her. She's just a wonderful person to begin with. So yeah, so those are probably the main ones anyway. Of course, we all have lots of people that change our lives as we go along this road.
Oh yeah, for sure. So, this question here is not about regret. It's about using the wisdom that you've gained throughout your life. So let's say you have a dream tonight and you run into your younger version, maybe in your 20s, and you can give your younger version one piece of advice based on the wisdom that you've gained throughout your life. What would you tell your younger version?
Oh, there's a lot of things I would say to my younger self. I mean, besides don't marry my ex-husband, that would be the first thing. But I went into pharmacy and just to have a job, and I really wish that I had gone to veterinarian school. I love animals, and wish that I had become a vet instead of being in pharmacy. That's a huge thing. If I had a time machine, I'm a huge sci-fi junkie, and boy, if I had a time machine, I would go to a different school. But yeah, I wish I had more music training. I wish I had actually gone to Berkeley or something for yes, I did have music training at college, but it was not to the extent that I wish I was at now. Yeah, I would go to Berkeley or something.
Yeah, yeah. So, what's been the best response that you've gotten from somebody, whether it's about with whatever work you've done, whether it's been music or helping people? What's been the best response you've ever gotten from somebody?
Wow, music. The best compliment I've ever got wasn't that, oh, well, you hit the high note so nice, or, wow, that was a great song. I was always in places and venues with older people that couldn't hear so well. And and the little old ladies would always come up to me after concerts and say, you know what? I could hear every word that you sang. And I said, well, that's good, because I wanted people to hear the message of the song. I mean, what's the whole point of getting up there if you don't understand the music and what they're singing? I always thought that was a great compliment, that I could project and enunciate well enough that everybody can hear the message that I'm bringing. And as far as the advocacy, one in particular, I was asked at my day job to write an article for the newsletter, the corporate newsletter, and I decided to do it about my abuse advocacy. And one of my coworkers came up to me and she told me she was being abused by her boyfriend that she lived with and wanted help. And so I took her under my wing and I told her step by step how to get out of this, abusive relationship. I told her exactly what to do. She did everything that I said, and she got out. And we don't work in the same office anymore. We're still really good friends, but she's somebody that there's a tangible life that I changed, or I had a part in changing. Is this guy she was living with was a real dirtbag, and he stalked her afterwards. I had to really work really hard to tell my coworker, look, you're not married to this person. You don't have any children. You can leave. You can cut him off. Block his email, block his phone number. Don't ever talk to him again. I mean, he would come to our apartment and stuff. I said, call the police. He has no power over you anymore. And finally, she understood that. You're right. He does not have any power over me. I'm done. And so, yeah, now she's living a great life with her new apartment and her 3 cats, and she has a great job, and she's happy, So that was one of the success stories.
Excellent. So everyone has a perception of who you are. Everyone that sees you as a musician or an advocate and family and friends, but ultimately you're the one that's living your life. You have a perception of yourself. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, you ask some really interesting questions.
Good.
You're like philosopher here.
Yeah, this is the real therapy question here.
I've never had anybody ask me that. I'm like, I'm first of all a child of God, a Christian, and I take my faith very seriously, and I try to be an authentic individual. Like, how you see me is how I am. I'm the same person at home as I am outside my home, and I'm not perfect, but I do try to make amends when I make a mistake. I own up to it, I'm confident in most things, but I do have my bad days. Yeah, but I'm very creative. I love people. I love helping others. How do I see myself? I don't have any problems with self-esteem. I guess that was thanks to my parents. They've always been huge supporters whatever I did, and told me that I was beautiful and smart, and yeah, that always came with me throughout my life. So without being conceited, that's probably what I'd say is I like myself. I like what I see in the mirror, and I sleep well at night because I live the life that I want and try and helping others, try and pass the blessings I've gotten to other people.
Wonderful. That's a great answer. So let me ask you this before we go. I want to know, anybody out there that wants to know more about services, music, anything related to your world, where can they go out on the web to find out?
Absolutely. I mean, my headquarters is dswministries.org. Everything you need is on my website. So you can see my podcast, The Wounds of the Faithful. You can listen to that on any podcast platform, or you can listen to it on my website. If you want to find a Mending the Soul group in your area, I will set you up with that. That is free. Those groups are free anywhere in the world. They're facilitators all over the world, so you can go to mendingthesoul.org for that, or you can contact me and I will find you a group in your area. My email is Diana, Diana, at dswministries.org. I have my music on my website and to listen to and to purchase if you so desire. But I'd like to reiterate and close with, I am here to help anybody out there that's listening. If you are in a terrible situation, you are worth love. Yeah, I always get emotional here. You are worthy of love and respect. Don't delay getting help. You're not going to regret it. So I'll help you any way that I can. If I don't know the answer, I will find somebody who does, who can help you.
Wonderful. Diana, hey, thank you very much for taking time out today. Good luck with everything.
Thank you so much for having me today, Joe.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.